Welcome back to the Intuition Incubator. Today I have with me my guy, This is my son, Wyatt. And Wyatt, I wanted to have you on this show because I really admire how you kind of go about your life. And of course, I like to think that I taught you everything you know. But whether that be the case or not, I think that you just have a lot of wisdom to share here about how you tap into your inner knowing, whether you're talking to folks your age or folks my age. So, welcome to the Intuition Incubator, Wyatt.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Mhm.
So, I kind of the first thing I sort of wanted you to share for people is, you were in kind of a funk, when you probably your last year of high school, and you and I got into it a lot around applying for college and all these kinds of things. And I wanted you to kind of share what was going on for you at that time, what happened, how you got yourself out of it, and what the next things that occurred were.
Um, yeah, so I think yeah, we were getting into it for a while there in our relationship. Had its ups and downs, and I think a lot of that had to do with just kind of me being a teenager and you're getting to the end of your high school career and you're ready to get out of the house. I've been living with you for 17 years now. And so I think a lot of the buildup was that, which I think is completely normal. I think most kids around that age go through a very, very similar thing. And so I was dealing, like most people, I was dealing with most kids my age, I was dealing with a lot of anxiety um, especially around social anxiety. I know the COVID year had a big impact in kind of what my social life was like, and it impacted that pretty hard. And so I remember you had introduced me to some kind of alternative mindfulness practices with meditation, and you introduced me to those when I was in high school, and it all made sense to me, and it was perfectly cool. But it never was very practical because none of my friends, my social life coming back into my life, there's nothing around me that I guess reassured the fact that I should be doing this or I should be doing that. So I just instantly reverted back once I got home to just my old programs and my environment. And then once I moved to college, as you know, I ended up I was going to college for baseball to play baseball. And I tore the labrum in my shoulder. And that sidelined me for the recovery period for that is about a year and a half to a year. And so I got the surgery and I was recovering, and it was my freshman year in high school. I went out to play ball with one of my buddies, and I just fell into this pretty deep it was my all-time low for that point in my life. I was a lot of social anxiety. I couldn't get out of the house. I wasn't I didn't have the relationship with my teammates like my buddy did that I was there with, because I couldn't go to the practices, I couldn't go to the games, I couldn't play at all. And eventually it hit me that I remembered all these practices that I had been introduced to a year prior to that. And my mind started turning, and I remember the one thing that I just kept saying to myself is like, if I could learn how to be happy right now when I have everything stacked up against me, then I can be happy for the rest, like anywhere else in my life I could be happy. um so I just started doing those practices. I started asking the questions, and I think that's really all you need to do. Once you ask the question and then you follow um that question a little bit to try and get the answer, then that opens up 10 more questions, and it just leads you down this path of self-development.
So, what was the question? What was the question you were asking, and what was the practice you were doing? I'm just going to move my fan up here.
Yeah. Well, so the question that I was asking, I think has, I mean, I don't know if it was like a particular question, but it's more like, is there anything more in this? Or, I mean, I guess the question also was, can I be happy in this moment? Like it was almost an experiment for me. Like I knew that what I was feeling was not what I wanted to feel. And so I was curious. I was like, well, let's see if this actually works. Let's see if I can create happiness in this scenario, if it really is all just a perspective. in my head, and it was. And so the practice that I really started doing was I picked up meditation, and I really started meditating every single day and listening to books on meditation and listening to podcasts on meditation and just seeing how far down the rabbit hole I could go. And I ended up
Wait,
um
before you say more, I really want to point out what you just said because you asked yourself a question that most people don't ask themselves because we've been conditioned, really, I think you'll agree with me, to just believe that, oh, well, I feel like crap. My life is kind of a mess. I came out to play baseball. I can't play baseball. I don't have any friends. I feel so anxious I can't go out. I'm, whatever, and my life sucks. And most people in that moment would not think to say, well, let's see, could I make myself happy by not changing anything in my environment? Could I make myself happy without it being, I got to transfer schools? What do I need to do? I got to try and make myself go out. I got to make another friend. I got to, right? Like that's not the
yeah,
question you were asking. That wasn't, you weren't even there yet. You were
no.
just, everything sucks in my life. Can I figure out how to feel happy with everything externally staying the same? That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, yeah, it is. And I think this was probably also a little bit of overflow from the last few years and that I had in high school, where after that COVID year, I wasn't super happy. And then we'll all of a sudden say, okay, I can pack up my stuff, move to California, live alone, live with my buddy. And every time I would tell my friends that when I was moving out, they'd be like, oh my gosh, that sounds awesome. Like, that sounds like so much fun. And in my head, it was like, yeah, that's going to be a ton of fun. And then when I went out and did it, I still felt the exact same way that I did when I was back home, except even worse because now I had the injury and I was completely secluded from all my peers. And so I think that kind of, I've started to realize I'm like, wow, I'm still the same person here that I was there. And I think it's so easy for us to recognize a problem and then we look externally for the solution on how to fix it. And I decided to look internally and see if I could change myself. And maybe changing myself would then change my outer environment, or at least my perception of my outer environment. Um,
Yeah, so this is like a huge question. And I just want to say that for moms out there, like when I introduced you to this work in the first time and you weren't ready to do it or whatever. And of course, in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, I introduced you to this and why won't you do this? And I see you're being anxious and I know I can fix your problems. And why won't you just listen to what I'm saying? Right. And which I think a lot of moms can probably relate to. But what happened was I planted a seed, and that seed you remembered a year later.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And that's how it works so often for kids. And you now you talk to a lot of parents who want their kids to get into this, and you'll kind of say the same thing, right?
yeah, I will. So my main thing for them is you can't give other people motivation, and so everyone has to arrive for something to be super impactful. Like, there's a certain amount of human psychology where they have to arrive at that decision themselves. And so I think you did a great job where you planted a seed. And then the sad thing about this work is it oftentimes take crisis for someone to change. And so I had the seed planted, and then I was hit with crisis, which was my injury and a pretty bad situation. And it kind of left me with no other options, in my mind. I mean, obviously I could have kept going the way it was, but I just wasn't happy doing that. And I think the other big motivation for me, and a big thing that I left out was I, the first time I was introduced to this kind of work, I didn't really meet anyone my age. I was hanging around all older people.
Mm.
And the the second time I was kind of dove into it, I met a whole bunch of people my age, and it left me with a level of inspiration and a will to do it because I finally got validation that it was okay for someone my age to go out and do this. I didn't have to live by the normal societal rules that are for uh for kids in college, which is, I mean, it's just the basic stuff. And I chose to go a different route, and it's it's been a super helpful. So if there are parents out there that want to get their kids involved in this stuff, the best thing you can do is plant the seed and then completely leave it alone. just emphasize how much power it has. And the whole, I think the exact words my mom said to me was, I just gave you the keys to the kingdom or something like that. Um, and
Well, it
she,
probably wasn't that calm. I was kind of like,
yeah,
Wyatt, I just gave you the keys to the kingdom. I've got nothing else.
yeah,
That's really how I felt. But I had to let go. I had to let go at that
yeah.
moment, right?
She pushed me for a good amount of time, but yeah, then she left it and she didn't push it anymore. And then I arrived at the decision myself, and I think that's the best way because especially with parents, I know that if she were to push really hard, then I would resist, and like I see that with my younger brother a little bit too. Um, and the more that we push something, the more that he resists. I mean, it's a little bit different with me because I'm his brother, but I observe it with like my parents. So, yeah,
And I think that what this is the reason why I wanted to have you on Wyatt is exactly what you just said, because there are kids your age. You're going to be 22 here in a few weeks. Oh my God. And there are kids your age, that are listening, and there's a little younger and whatnot that, just like you said, like it helped you to see a bunch of other kids doing this work and seeing them
yeah,
have success. And in fact, we were at an event, I think even though it didn't take hold then, there was a kid there, a young guy who had a massive transformation out of depression. And you didn't tell me then, but when you started doing the work a year later, you said, that was really, really impactful when I heard his testimonial about how he got himself, and he was very depressed, like almost suicidally depressed,
yeah,
and put the work in for like a year. And he also said that too, right? He said he meditated for like a year. It didn't happen overnight. And
hmm
that was very impactful for you. And so one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is that very reason, because we're paying it forward, right? Like someone will hear this and hopefully have the same impact that kid had on you.
yeah. I mean, anything can help. And I remember I saw him, and it was a super inspirational story, or testimony. And the one thing that I wanted to do after I saw that, after we watched him, was I wanted to go up and meet him and just talk to him and pick his brain. But at the time, that was in 2021. And so that was right at the end of COVID. Um, and so I remember that was like in the midst of all my social angst. And so I couldn't approach him because I was paralyzed with social anxiety. And
Oh.
yeah, and I was scared to. And so, I do think it's important to go out and talk to people our own age that are doing stuff that inspire us and that we look up to, or maybe even something that we're just interested in or we're curious about. Um, but yeah,
Yeah. And, I didn't know, I think at that time that was why, right? So, as from the parent perspective, for the parents listening, I was just super frustrated that I couldn't get you to do what to me seemed so obvious to do. And later found out it's really because you were so anxious. And I think a lot of kids that went through COVID at the
yeah,
age that you did are suffering with that as well. And
mhm.
I think I pushed it, not really understanding that this was not like voluntary. It was, yeah, you wanted that too, but you're like, I can't. And of course, a kid isn't going to be able to verbalize that at that time.
Yeah, and it's something that I still see in a lot of people and in myself. At certain times is it's so I don't know. I recently had some experiences where there was either I had a negative perception of a person that they didn't like me, or maybe someone had a negative perception of me. And then after talking it out, I realized that they had the negative perception of me just because I was socially anxious in the situation. And so I couldn't really express my full self to them, or vice versa. They were socially anxious. And so I kind of projected that onto them. I'm like, oh, this person doesn't like me. But in reality, they were just struggling with whatever they were going through. And so I think it's just a lesson that we all have our stuff inside, and to try and I don't know, I guess try not to use that and get
Personalize it.
yeah, personalize it in other places. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I love that. So, okay, so you started doing the work. You went from anxious and miserable and depressed and wounded and hurt and all the things, and you went all in and you started meditating. And tell us what happened. You started asking questions. Can I be happy this way?
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing, or the first step was was I had a big release because I just be once you like the act of meditation is just to become more aware of. So you just slowly become more aware of yourself and who you are. And I think that was the biggest thing for me is I realized I was in California. I'm with this friend. I'm with a whole bunch of these guys, like this friend group that we had. I didn't really like a whole bunch. Like they're really cool, nice people, but they just weren't my type of people on my path that I was going. And so I started to explore avenues myself. And the first big thing I came to realize is I didn't want to play baseball anymore. And
Mm.
so that was a big release for me, where I realized that my motivations to play baseball were not because I loved the game, but were more towards, like the wealth and fame avenue that could go along with it. And I honestly realized that a lot of it that I was motivated to do that so other people would know my name before I'd have to introduce them to myself, which is just it's an out for that social anxiety that I had developed because of COVID. And so I was just using baseball for that. And so once I came to the realization that baseball is not what I wanted to do anymore, I started to explore like transferring schools and other stuff. And so I really got into the creation and the manifestation aspects that meditation provides as well. And so I began to start focusing on another school. And then a big thing that I really started manifesting was another friends, was or more friends and a different type of friend group that kind of fit me a little bit better for where I was going. And I got both of those. By the time that first year was up and I hit the summer, I had gotten accepted into the University of Miami, which was my dream school at the time. And I'd also made a whole bunch of friends back in California where I was that were different from my friend group. And so it was kind of just the tale of two separate semesters. And actually, because I was really focusing on becoming abundant in friends, like having abundance of friends and people around me. And it's cool because it just carries over, right? Like I was really focusing on that in California and I manifest so much of friends. The summer passes, I go back home, and then when I go to Miami, the first day I'm there, I meet one person, and this one person happens to be one of the biggest extroverts that I've ever met in my entire life, and he introduces me to this massive group of friends, and now we have a great community of people that we live with and we have campfires with, and so it was a really, really, I have no doubt that I created it from the field. So
Well, how do you have, well, first, before I ask that question, well, no, how do you have no doubt that you created it from the field? And then I'll ask the other question.
just because it came in the way that I didn't expect it, and I put zero effort into finding these friends. I mean, just like weird synchronicities would happen. Like in California, I'd just be walking alone, and then the one guy that I happened to have a conversation with on the bus like 3 months ago, I just see him sitting at lunch with one of my kids who I talked to in class. And so I just go sit down next to him, and they invite me over to their house to watch the basketball game or whatever it was. And then in Miami, I just met him on the transfer day, and I honestly thought he was a little bit of a I thought he was a little bit of a dick at first when I first heard him because he's loud, and I just happened to be right next to him, talk to him, and then we had a ton of things in common. And he was a really cool guy, and we're still really good friends. So, it just happened in ways I least expect, and I had to put no effort in. Like the experience found you because you're already emulating the abundance of having whatever it was.
So speak to that because I know that there are some people listening who don't know the actual practice and what that actually means.
Yeah.
You didn't put any 3D effort into it, meaning you didn't walk up to people, you didn't take medication to get over your anxiety or throw yourself into, situations and say, "Hi, I'm Wyatt." You didn't do any 3D work.
Yeah.
What was exactly what you were doing?
Yeah, I mean, so what in my experience and what a lot of spiritual teachers teach is there's two ways that things can work, right? You can have the 3D experience and then that creates the emotion, or you can have the emotion and then that creates the experience. And so all I was doing is I was trying to create the emotions of what it would feel like to have this possibility or this manifestation come true. And then the most amount of work is not during your meditations. The meditations are just practice for so you can bring it up easier and easier and easier. The actual work is in your waking day because that's when you're going to be confronted by experiences or things happen. I mean, say you're sitting on the bus and then one of your classmates walks by and he doesn't sit next to you, but he goes to the back of the bus and sit next to someone else. I mean, there's two thoughts that can go through your head. There can be like, oh, he doesn't like me. He, whatever, has this problem with me. And that's a not very abundant thought for someone who is looking to be abundant in friends. And so you catch that thought and then you change it into whatever you want it to be, which is give them some grace, or maybe just go back and sit next to all of them. Maybe you make a new friend through this guy. So there's just so many different ways that you can take things. And I was just starting to play with the fact that who I was up to that point had just been conditioned into me. And I can actually just see and pick different things in people. And I'd be like, oh, I really admire that trait in that person. I want to be more like that. And so I start shaping my thoughts to be more like that. And thus then my actions started to be more in alignment with whatever that was.
So in the meditation, as you're with your eyes closed and music and slowing your brain waves down and beginning to imagine the experience of what it would feel like to have a bunch of friends, and then you're priming your brain and body for that experience. And then you're also through meditation becoming more aware of like, oh yeah, on the bus, where normally you wouldn't have even thought about, wouldn't have recognized that thought maybe that you had in your example. But
Yeah.
because you've been meditating and practicing observing what's happening in your mind, when in that example, you're on the bus and all of a sudden you're like, oh, there's one of those thoughts
Yeah.
that belongs to my old self.
Yeah, exactly. And then you start to realize that there's an addiction between the body and feeling that way. Like jumping into the victimhood of being a victim of like, oh, he doesn't like me, what blah 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 blah, he thinks this or that about me. And so you have to understand that there's that victimization has an emotional frequency, and then so does like abundance. And so you can pick one of the two, and they're going to attract different things. And so if you have that state of being a victim, and that's who you are, and it's kind of what you've been conditioned to practice, then no matter where you look, you're going to feel like a victim, because you can pick any single scenario or any single experience and you can swing it to be a victim. I mean, that's just how it is. Everything is just perspective. That's why all of our experiences of reality are just completely different. We all have a different experience of it.
So speak to this idea of victim briefly, because I think it's a really important one, and particularly because 95% of people will say, I'm not a victim. I don't,
Yeah.
that's not me, right? And so I think you have to unpack that a little bit because I think you're speaking to it in a very important way. And I think it can be really important for people to hear, like, wait a minute, in what ways because like it's not a bad word. It's
Mm-mm.
just a program, right? But in what ways am I maybe a quote victim to my environment? Because if you can't spot it, you can't do anything about it. So can you say
Yeah.
more about what you mean when you say victim?
Yeah, well, I mean, in like a literal term, if you're not creating your reality, then you're a victim to it. And so, I mean, you could be a victim to anything. And so I just noticed a program that I had, and a program meaning kind of like an underlying set or an underlying. I like to think of a computer. Like there's codes and there's programs in a computer, and whatever those codes and those programs are, they present a image on the screen, and they can vary for whatever. And their programs for me are the same. It's like an emotional way of being, or maybe emotional way of thinking that I'm unaware of. And so it's just running on an automated program. I don't even realize it. And so I finally got some awareness on this victimization program not too long ago. And I was one of those people that was like, oh, I'm not really that big of a victim, but everyone has a little bit of victim in them, just depending on the certain circumstance. In this particular stance, um I had to go and see, that's the word, and the words that I focused on is had to and get. Um, I was on my way. So I have this job now where I work research for meditation, and it's this amazing job where I get to travel with a whole bunch of amazing people. And during this, we do a 4 hour meditation, and this is a very highly sought after event to get into. And so I get the blessing to work them, you know. So I was walking to this meditation, and I didn't even realize it, but in my head I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I have to go to this meditation, blah 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 blah. I have to do this, I have to do that. And I was just feeling sorry for myself. And I realized that, and I'm like, wait a minute, what am I doing? Like, I get to go to this meditation, I get to go do this, I get to go do that, I get to do that. And just even just changing, flipping those two words for me just completely changed one, how much I was excited for the experience. And then two, it just switches you from I guess experiencing to creating, because you can create whatever you want to experience. And so for me, that was like the biggest victimization program that I've come across for me so far.
Yeah, I think that's a great example because, and it's so true, right? It's like, and that happens, it happens all the time. I just caught myself in one yesterday, or the day
Yeah.
before, where all of a sudden I'm like, wait, why am I thinking this way? About things that even you might love your job, for example,
Yeah.
but in the moment you find yourself like, oh my God, I can't believe I have to.
I
And
know.
that is, as you say, putting a frequency out. And so it's
Yeah.
not like your whole personality is a victim. It's just the importance of identifying where our thoughts and where we're behaving as a victim, because that's what we're going to attract more of.
And I know the holidays just ended, and it could even just be as simple as, oh, I have to go over to my family's house. It's like, no, you don't have to. Like, you get to go to your family's house, and that's amazing. It's one of the best experiences to be surrounded by a whole bunch of people that love you. I mean, who wouldn't want that? And so just changing that simple vocabulary just completely changed your outlook on the experience. And so,
And PS, you don't have to go anywhere, right? We're adults.
yeah.
So if
Yeah,
you really
exactly.
don't want to, if your family is
Don't go.
not friendly and loving or
Yeah.
whatever, don't go.
Don't go. Yeah. Otherwise, yeah, just say like, "Oh, I gotta go," and then I guarantee then you will have a better experience in during that holidays if you did that. So
Yeah, I love that. And I
yeah,
know that this is something that you're kind of working on all the time, like because a lot of times when you're at work or, at one of these events, you'll call me and say, "Oh, this program just came up," or "This is what I'm working on," or one of the big words that I hear you use a lot is worthiness, a worthiness program. And I think that is also absolutely universal and something, many of us don't really want to admit to or talk about. And
yeah,
I know, I'm just sure you have the same experience. I do often too. People would look at me like I'm crazy if I would even say that,
yeah.
because we don't think that anybody else is dealing with worthiness. But can you speak to that at all? What is a worthiness program when you say I have a worthiness program I'm working about, or this just came up around my worthiness?
Yeah, I mean, for me, worthiness has been a very deep program, and I think a lot of, and for me, it kind of developed in early childhood. Um, and it's just kind of an unworthiness to feel like you can either receive something or maybe give something, I've thought a lot about this. And so for me, what I kind of realized that it was is it's almost like I don't view myself as a person, because you can go around and you see other people outside of you and you're like, okay, like that person, and I put myself in their scenario. I'm like, okay, if this person came up and wanted to help me or they were in need of help, I would either happily receive that or happily give it to them because I know that they deserve it. Um, but a lot of us struggle with valuing ourselves in the same way. And it's something that I've really worked on, like knowing that if you are in need of help, then just go ask people and people would be more than happy to help you. Or if you're like your worthiness to be loved or whatever in a relationship, like, or to receive money, whatever it is. I mean, it goes so deep and there's so many different avenues you can take it because it's such a huge, just emotional presence. But, uh, yeah, I mean, I don't really know where you wanted to take the worthiness, but
Well, I mean, it's really primal, right? I mean, it's one of the biggest drivers that we all have is, am I enough?
yeah, yeah,
But no, I mean, I think that's great the way you explained it, because it's just being able to be in recognition of that, right? Because a lot of people, like for example, people will say, well, they want a partner, they want to have, they want to get married, or they want a partner, or whatever. or they want a raise and they want a different job and all of those things. And they kind of beat their heads up against a wall a little bit. Why can't I have this? Why isn't it happening? I'm doing all the right things. But there's this underlying program, as you're calling it, of I'm not worthy of those things. And
Yeah.
when you're thinking a thought with your mind, but there's your body is basically saying I'm not worthy of it, then you're giving the universe a mixed signal, right? And I always say you can't get something you're not willing to receive.
Yeah, exactly. And there's levels to it. I always like to view it as peeling back an onion. And so for me, one of the biggest ones that I had to overcome was I was really trying to manifest abundance in like monetary value. And so I came up against this big program like unworthiness to receive. I felt unworthy to receive. And so even though I was putting out the intention, I would just notice areas in my life where I didn't feel worthy to receive if someone, I mean, because abundance can come in any way. We have a tight view that it has to be money, like we have to be wealthy to be abundant, but that's not true. I mean, I even just having someone offer to pay for a meal, like that is a form of abundance. Having a friend offer this, or even just having a whole bunch of friends. I mean, that's more abundant. I actually saw a social media video a while ago, and it was this person with her family, and they were just all laughing. And then I just looked at the comments, and one of the comments was like, "This person has no idea how rich they are." And I thought that
Mm,
was such a good way to put that because it's so easy to see that and to just take it for granted. But in reality, I really do think that that's the most abundant you could possibly be, is just being surrounded by people who love you.
mm.
So I thought that was a great way to put it. But yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. I want to jump back in time for a moment because it's called the Intuition Incubator. And I
Mhm.
want to ask this question about your decision to play baseball. You said in the middle of your meditations are what brought you the awareness that, wait a minute, it's really not even about this injury. I don't really want to play baseball.
Yeah.
So this would go back to the question of, was that decision made intuitively or not intuitively? And how do you know in hindsight?
I mean, it was made intuitively for sure.
To play
Um,
baseball or to not play baseball?
to not play baseball.
Yeah, to
Play
play baseball,
baseball
though,
was
was made
forced.
how?
To play baseball was just, I mean, it was a lot of fun. Like I had a lot of fun playing baseball. All my friends were in it when I was younger, and it came, and the idea to go to college kind of came again from one, the motivation for the wrong reasons that I talked about a little bit earlier. And two, I just didn't really know what to do. And so I didn't know what I wanted my degree to be. I didn't know that, but I did know I played baseball. I know I had a whole bunch of friends who were also going to college to play baseball. And so it was the easy path for me. And in hindsight, as soon as I realized that I didn't want to play anymore, I knew that I had known I didn't want to play anymore for a while. But because we always know, like the body always knows, we just got to get in tune with it. And as soon as you make the decision, you just feel there's a certain level of just tuning into your body, and you just know like that was the right decision. I know that I'm on the right path now. And it's very liberating and it's very freeing, even though it can be a tough decision. I mean, if this decision's to leave someone in a relationship or to quit a job, whatever it is, at some point along the path, you have to take a leap of faith and trust into the unknown. Um, and so it can be scary. And I think that's a big thing is our intuition is always telling us stuff, but then we're our mind goes and it's our minds are very analytical. And so we look at things like, oh no, like that's this or that, and we can talk ourselves out of it. And so I have a buddy actually who says whenever we have a project idea, he doesn't even want to talk about it. He's just like, we just got to do it. Like you just got to
Mm.
do it because the more you think about it, the more you're just going to talk yourself out of it. If you have an intuitive feeling to do something, then you're either going to trust it or you're not going to trust it. So you either got to go for it or just stay in the same cycle that you've been in. And so you can either take that leap of faith or you can stay.
That's great advice. And not so easy to take. Like I know for you, a lot of times you'll get stuck in a thinking cycle. I know I will.
Yeah,
Um, and then before you know it, you've thought yourself out of the decision. Just
yeah,
like,
exactly.
yeah, well, the opportunity's gone. It's no big deal. it's inspiration strikes, and then we think our
Yeah,
way out of inspiration.
exactly. Yeah. And it's easy when you're in a meditation too to come out of it and be like, well, was what I was experiencing actually that profound? Because in a meditation you achieve lower brainwave states. And so you're kind of right in between that subconscious and the conscious mind. And so it's easy to for it to almost feel like a dream once you're back fully conscious. But it really happened, and you just got to trust it. And that trust, I think, comes with a belief. So what I kind of did is I kind of started small. Just like little things. If I felt an intuitive feeling to pick this class over that class or this or that or whatever, and then you do that, and then once it works out, then that builds your belief and your intuition a little bit more, right? And then it just makes it a little bit easier, a little bit easier, a little bit easier once that belief just grows and grows and grows and grows. Um, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great advice. Taking small things that you can just practice with,
yeah,
that you can practice seeing how does this feel? How does that feel?
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's the best for everything, even just manifesting. If you want to trying to create something, um, the harder things to create tend to be the things that we're very, very emotionally attached to. Um, and that's because a big aspect of creating or manifesting is you have to let go, right? Like, you have to know on such a deep level that you already have it, that you're not looking for it anymore because you're feeling the emotion of what it feels like to have it and to experience it. So you're not actively looking for it, because if you look for it, then you're separate from it. And you can't be separate from it if you're going to create it. So
Yeah. Yeah. So I know for me, one thing that I would like for listeners to hear as a parent, as the parent in this conversation, is well, I had the idea of what I really wanted to say, which was, oh, I know. You had said that, a lot of the worthiness programs and a lot of the struggles and the social anxiety and all these kind of things that came up, they came up in early childhood. And there's a lot of things you don't remember, as you and I have talked about. I remember a lot of things. And so I remember all the things right about your childhood because I was there and I was old enough to remember. And I think one of the things that's really hard for parents is we tend to beat ourselves up or blame ourselves when our kids are struggling. And, I can sit here with you and hear you talk about how things were hard for you and you had social anxiety and you feared a lot. And I can think in my mind, oh, I said this when he was 3 and I did this and this was his experience and I was responsible for that. And so these are all the things. Um, and what's really important, I think, for listeners to know is that, yeah, all those things happened. And yeah, I made all those quote mistakes. And yes, we could say that your struggles, or a large part of them, came from my behavior, my choices, all of these things, right? And that's part of life and that's part of being human. And I guess what I really want parents to know is that when you beat yourself up over that, it's pointless. Um, and that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And that when I sit here with you today and see everything that you've become and everything that you're becoming and that you're working toward, even though sometimes I still see you tell me, oh, this is so tough, or this is the da, 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 or all these things. Um, I know this was your path and your destiny, and you had to have me as your mom with all the very particular mistakes that I made in order for you to have the experience you're having and to have the journey that you have. And I just don't want anybody to walk away from this episode thinking, oh, wow, Abby did this so perfectly. And so that's why she's got this awesome kid and he's got it all figured out because, like, that is so far from the case. But what we're both working to really do, I think, is to love ourselves and forgive ourselves and to trust, as you say, the journey. You know,
yeah,
I,
and
I go ahead.
it's more than pointless to worry about. Uh, it's just yeah, it's not worth worrying about mistakes that you may or may not have made with your kids and the way that they ended up, because it doesn't matter. I mean, in the end of the day, everyone's going to experience what they're going to experience. And for me, when I look back on my struggles, The ones that I've overcome, like that baseball injury where I tore my labrum, it's one of the things I'm most grateful for now because I know that without it, I wouldn't be who I am. And so everything that we come up against is just an experience meant for us to learn from and to shape us in some way or another. And so, I mean, obviously, there's times that it comes up where they're really tough things. But if you can manage to pull yourself back and take a look at whatever you're going through and just work through it and try and find ways that you could grow or you could become a better person at the other end of this adversity, then I think you'll actually find yourself having gratitude for that situation. And so I know we've had a conversation in the past where you have guilt about this or that um, thing that happened when I was younger. But I mean, again, like one, either I don't remember it, or two, it's just something that I have to overcome. So it's really not that big of a deal.
And Wyatt, to speak to, because I know in the world that you live in, and potentially a lot of the people that might listen to this, um, there's there's the mystical, right? That people reach for in meditation, like they want to see, they want to have that experience where they're feeling like they're touching God, or they're having seeing all the sacred geometry, or having a brain orgasm, or all these crazy things that happen in this. And we tend to compare ourselves to the person who's meditating, if we're talking about at an event or whatever, or someone that we're talking to, oh yeah, I had the most amazing experience and it all happened and then everything changed. And then my life has just been pure joy and bliss ever since then, and then there are the majority of people who just keep doing the work and they're not having that kind of mystical experience. I wonder if you could kind of speak to that that balance between 5D and 3D, between trying to reach the mystical and living in the 3D experience. Because to what we're sort of talking about now, it's like, well, we can have this moment of awareness, right? Oh my God, I just broke my victim program. I just did such a great job. And then a week later, we're acting like a total jerk and being a complete victim. And it's like, God dang it, how come I
Yeah.
haven't overcome this yet? And lack of forgiveness for the human experience.
Yeah, and I mean, I think first off, I don't think it's always a little bit sketchy to claim that you've completely overcome a program. It's definitely burned me a few times where I think I've overcome something and then I notice it on the way back. Like I said, I view it like peeling an onion, right? So, I mean, say you have a ball of unworthiness, and all you're doing is you're just peeling back that onion, like you're peeling back the layers of the program. But there's always deeper layers and there's always deeper things you can go. For example, like manifesting abundance. Like you manifest a little bit of abundance and then you're tested again. It's like, okay, well now you have to spend all this abundance, and then if you spend it, then you're gonna receive it back. And so you just gotta jump in and you gotta trust again and you gotta dive deeper in. In regards to the mystical and kind of balancing the 5D and the 3D, I um I don't have like the best perspective on this because for me, kind of creating and living in the 3D has always come easily to me. And the things that I've recently had to put a lot of work into is trying to cultivate that mystical for me. And I've had mystical experiences, sure. Um, but for me, it's always been pretty easy to stay in the 3D, but I do think it's definitely important. I get what you're saying because you have to see things as they are, and then you also have to see things as you want them to be. Um,
Mm.
and so I think and I think that just comes with experience in doing it, on knowing what time is good to do that and what time is good to do this. And I would also, I challenge people who are just starting out in this to see how far they can take creating their own reality and see how far they can push that perspective, because I don't know if there's a boundary, like we're just all in this experiment of life. And it's not like I have it figured out. It's not like anyone has it figured out. We're all just trying to create a roadmap for ourselves, um, to try and find the way. And so it would be cool for a community of people just to really come together and push themselves, see how far the limits to reality can go, and push those barriers. And yeah, just have fun with it.
Well, this has been wonderful. I wonder if you're for hire because I know that there's going to be some people listening that are going to be like, "Oh, I would like my kid to talk to Wyatt," or they're going to want to pick your brain about, learn some techniques from you and whatnot, or just hear your experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been pretty busy lately, but I definitely I'm open to I love talking to kids my age about this stuff. If they're into it or maybe if they're not into it yet. So, it's one of my favorite things to do. So
What's the
yeah.
best way for people to reach you?
Probably just text me. Um, so yeah, my
So I can put that in the show notes, or maybe your email or something in the show notes.
yeah, I put my email or my phone number in there, and then yeah, if anyone, I'd love to help out if there's need for that. So yeah.
And people can reach out to me to find his number too if we decide that we don't want it quite that public. I don't know. We'll have to think that through a little bit. But tell me before we sign off, like, what is if you could leave people with one thing, like, what do you want people to know more than anything?
Um, Probably just that it's gonna be okay. Like there's no need to stress. There's no need to do this. I think the more that I've dove into who I am and who I want to be, the more I kind of realize that just everything is perspective. Like as one of my teachers, and these events that we've been referring to is run by a guy named Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he's kind of given me a lot of stuff. And he said something at the last event to us, and he said one of the youth asked him a question, and I think his response was, "You would be surprised at how little the universe judges you, or how little judgment there is." Like
Mm.
so, and it's so true. All this judgment that we have is just self put on our, like we just put it on ourselves because it's the way that society's conditioned us or the way that we see it in movies, whatever it is. And so just I would just I would just encourage just to have fun with your life and to experiment with different things and just try and be a little bit more compassionate for yourself and not as judgmental.
I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
All
All right.
right, we might have to have an encore.